Elvis is the new biographical film about the king of rock and roll himself, Elvis Presley. Here, he is portrayed by Austin Butler, and he shares as much screen time as his manager, Colonel Tom Parker, played by Tom Hanks, who prides himself on being the man who made Elvis a superstar. I have a feeling there will be viewers who won't be pleased with this biopic, and I think it will be because of the occupant in the director's chair. The filmmaker Baz Luhrmann, the man behind Moulin Rouge and The Great Gatsby, is one of those directors who makes movies for himself. He is so in love with his directing style, from the rapid editing, to the zany camera movement, to the cartoonish tone. Baz is always in his own world when he's working behind the camera, so much so that he doesn't care if you're enchanted or annoyed. To be fair, the oddball tone of Elvis is more restrained than other works by Baz, such as The Great Gatsby or the Hugh Jackman-Nicole Kidman flop, Australia. Overall, Baz's signature style never really bothered me with Elvis, with the exception of one aspect, which is the occasional contemporary pop music, which was completely unnecessary and aggravatingly out of place with the time period. No doubt, viewers who are unaware the film is directed by Baz Luhrmann, let alone unfamiliar with his style, will be far more bewildered than I ever was. So how is the movie? Pretty good, I think. It's not on the level of Moulin Rouge, which is one of my favorite movies, actually, but I think it's better than The Great Gatsby or Australia. To put it simply, the first act is solid, the second act is okay, and the third act is rather excellent. With a runtime that clocks in at 2 hours and 40 minutes, the middle section does drag, with Elvis's fall from stardom in the late 60s. I found this section tedious and having too much focus, yet lacking in depth. If that second act could have been trimmed down a bit, I think it would have definitely improved the film. As for other flaws, much of Elvis's music is strangely underused. Half of the music sequences are disappointingly muted or are heard too briefly. Luckily, the scene involving Suspicious Minds truly delivers. That's my favorite Elvis song, and it's one of the reasons why the third act is so strong. I would say the best aspect of this film is the acting. Both of the leads, Austin Butler and Tom Hanks, knock it out of the park. I would go so far as to say that Hanks is so good, he occasionally upstages the king himself. Hanks disappears into the role of the Colonel, in part due to some state-of-the-art makeup effects, and I had to remind myself every now and then that I was watching the same man who played Forrest Gump, among other iconic characters. Hanks plays Elvis's infamous manager with such sleaze and such eccentricity, he is never a bore to watch throughout the movie's lengthy runtime. As good as Austin Butler is, it wasn't until the third act in which I could completely buy him as Elvis Presley. Elvis Presley's appearance is so legendary that whenever there would be a close-up shot of Butler's face, I repeatedly would become aware that I was watching an actor playing Elvis, not Elvis. Butler's facial features are just a little too different to completely convince me. However, once we get to that excellent third act, which depicts Elvis's deteriorating health and increasing weight gain, that was the point where Austin Butler genuinely loses himself as the king of rock and roll. Nevertheless, his performance is much better than I may be making it out to be. Butler has the voice, the mannerisms, and the moves to prove that the actor is a solid casting choice. Overall, the movie works. For this to be the first major motion picture about Elvis's life story, leave it to Baz Luhrmann to have the audacity to tell it his way. Despite the final result being an imperfect biopic, Baz gave it his all, and what he has to bring to the table here is far better than what I was expecting from a director who seems to make movies only for himself. From first frame to last, Baz is king, and you have no choice but to hear him roar. I give Elvis 3 out of 4 stars.